Hey, hello, welcome everyone. My name is Peter Frank. I am the Senior Director of Operations for the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, APMP, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to another edition of APMP's sponsored webinar series. Today's presentation is from our friends at RFPIO, titled How Proposal Teams Can Drive Overall Sales Productivity and Improve Outcomes. Now, our typical webinars are free to APMP members. It's a benefit of their membership, and we do our best to keep them vendor agnostic, or in other words, we want these webinars to offer takeaways that anyone could begin implementing immediately without having to solicit any particular service or product. We've learned over time, though, that many of our topics do deal with technology solutions, and a fair amount of our members are calling for more information about these products and services specifically. So while APMP remains vendor neutral, we do want to give our vendors a voice, and we do want to offer options where a vendor can produce a presentation with no restrictions to the content. So these sponsored webinars, they might include product demos, they might include best practices that you might be able to use without a particular service or product, but it may be something specific that you'll need the vendor software or service to do. So as always, you will receive a survey afterwards. So please let us know your thoughts about this experience. Was it clear to you what you were going to see? Was it valuable? What advice do you have for the vendor? We do share all the survey feedback with the vendors. So feel free to offer them advice about making these presentations even better. So before I turn things over, know that today's session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will go out via email to all registrants just a few hours after the presentation. And as you think of questions throughout today's session, I encourage you to go to the GoToWebinar control panel, and you'll find the questions pane. And you can type your questions there anytime during the presentation. Once the presentation is over, we'll open things up to the questions, and I will feed those to our host, and we'll do our best to address those later in the webinar. All right, I think we're ready to go now. So I will turn things over to today's presenter, Kelly Barnard, Response Management Strategist with RFPIO. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with everyone this morning. We are I'm from RFPIO. I'm Kelly Barnard. I'm a response management strategist. I have been in response management, RFPs specifically as part of sales for almost 20 years. It pains me to say that a little bit, but it's true. I really enjoy APMP. I am certified foundation level from many years ago, and I am just really passionate about RFPs. I currently am with RFPIO. I am the response management strategist. So really looking at how to take best practices, not only for us internally, but how to also help other companies work with the RFP process and how to really optimize that. I have been with RFPIO for just a short time. I'm a bit of a newbie. I am in my, I think, 7th or 8th week. I think 7th, and I enjoy it very much. But my previous experience is about 17 years, specifically in the health insurance industry. I spent 13 years previously with Cambia Health Solutions as the proposal manager of the proposal management, proposal strategy and development department. So if any of you are on this, hello. But today we are really looking at strategies to help RFP teams drive sales productivity. How to do this, how to look at data and how to use that to help show your value, and then how to also look at using that technology to help support your goals. So first and foremost is how to help drive that sales productivity. When looking at this, it really is understanding that you are a part of the sales team. Your job is to convince leadership. You might not be a sales rep, you might not necessarily even be organizationally aligned, but you are a critical component of that sales life cycle. a lot of times what I hear is kind of what ends up being a game of RFP telephone. Sales will come to your team or you and say, hey, I have this RFP that we need to get done. They kind of give you everything, and it's really looking at that project management and then trying to essentially herd the cats of SMEs, of leadership, trying to get that all done in a very short amount of time. But what happens is that you're also, if you aren't understanding exactly what that looks like from the very beginning, and you're kind of trying to get caught up on everything, it's too much to take in a very, very short amount of time. So then what you have to do is not only understand sales at that point and that strategy and how you are trying as a company to show your value in those proposals, but then you also have to essentially translate that for all of your SMEs, right? How many times have SMEs come to you and said, oh, like, what exactly, is there a spin I should put on this? What exactly should I be talking about? Sometimes the questions are very broad, right? In health insurance, describe your medical management programs. We have a lot. Which ones? Which ones should we talk about? And it really you rely on sales and that strategy to understand where to start and how to position that. So what with that you want to be able to do is understand and describe to sales leadership, to everyone involved, that the RFP team shouldn't just be there for the RFP. The RFP is part of the overall sales lifecycle. You want to understand how you're building up to that proposal, making sure that you want to move forward with the best proposal possible. So in that future state, you need to have that visibility, looking at the opportunities, the leads, the pipelines, what's coming, to make sure that you can do all kinds of things. Workforce planning, making sure that you have enough resources, that you aren't trying to essentially get caught up from all of that great work that your sales teams are doing. You want to be involved in that. It will help you become a better writer. It will help your subject matter experts understand. And I apologize, I'm getting an unstable internet connection, so I apologize if there is any issues. But it helps you as a proposal manager to field better questions from your field questions from your SMEs and give better answers. It really helps them be able to understand, because you're translating, you're taking that sales strategy and understanding how to put that into your proposals. And as you're coordinating all of that, you want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. How to do that is sometimes a bit more difficult. I have the utmost respect for every RFP coordinator and every proposal team out there. I feel that even with the most amount of support that you think that you can have, most proposal teams are still very under-resourced and undervalued. But if you truly take out that proposal, the RFP, everything that you and your team does in that overall sales life cycle, there's not a lot that can happen without that, right? In health insurance, there's nothing that really happens without those quotes or those RFPs that come in. So you want to make sure that you understand what's going on, and that sales understands exactly what it is that you're looking for and how you can help. One of the things that we have found that is great is joining sales huddles, pipeline meetings. A lot of times we have talked, with sales in the past and said, hey, how do we start to help, get a better understanding of what's coming down the line? And we don't have anymore in this current era, the pandemic era, we don't have that ability of kind of walking down the hallway and seeing a sales rep and having them go, oh, hey, that reminds me, I have some stuff I want to talk to you about. That doesn't happen anymore. So we need to be more proactive about how we are communicating with sales and being at the table. It is not RFP coordination is not a support function. RFP and response management is not solely a sales function. It is a company-wide response to be able to share your value, to share your story, and to share why you would be the best partner for a client or a customer. There are other ways that you can also do this, looking at how many markets you might have, maybe assigning someone, having what we would call champions, having those RFP coordinators or people on your team just be that face that, you can't be at every meeting. If there is a manager of the team, they can't be in every meeting and do all of that other work. So it really is best to try to, divide and conquer, essentially. But it really is understanding how to get into those meetings. And then at that point, when you start bringing up ideas and, hey, we can help you out with this, it starts to get people to understand more of the intent of a proposal team or a response management team, and to say, oh, it's not just that I have an RFP in hand, but really looking at, no, it's about winning and retaining accounts. That's what we want to do, and that's how we can help. So we do have an email template here that is part of the slides here about a type of a way to ask. I always think that a conversation is best, but sometimes it is hard to get people on the phone or to get them to kind of understand. This is also a great way to kind of broach the topic, and to be able to put that into terms of what it is that makes sense to them, right? So this looks at, here are what's the dollar value of these proposals that we worked on. This is what we want to be involved with. This is how much is coming through and dependent on our team, and why we want to be a part of this much earlier on. If it's not dollar value, maybe it's membership, maybe it's number of employees. However, your sales goals are looked at, and what's the important numbers for sales. So understanding their goals, their quotas, things like that, and putting that into those terms to say, hey, this is how much we are involved in, even if you aren't really aware of that. Second is then, how do you get to some of those numbers? The various ways to collect the data and to prove your value to the leadership. The first thing is, I always say this, and I credit my former boss for this. Even if you think everyone knows how much you are working, they don't. When I started working with my former boss, Scott Burton, shout out to you, I said, everyone knows our process. Everyone knows how much we're working. Everyone knows how busy we are and how, we're all of this stuff that's happening. And a direct quote, he goes, I don't think they do. And that always stuck with me of, no matter how much I thought that we were talking to other people, how much we were talking with sales, leadership, SMEs, all across the board, there still was an air of not really understanding the sacrifice and how much my team was putting into everything that we were doing. So think about all of the times that you have ever been told, you guys are just magic, right? Like, I don't know how you do it. You guys are amazing. You just do this work. This proposal is fantastic. It just poof, right? Here's this, great proposal. That's a sign that they aren't really understanding all of the other sides of what goes into it. I always said my team is magic, right? They are amazing, but I don't want them to have to perform magic. At the end of the day, we aren't elves, right? We are human, And that, too much causes burnout. And burnout obviously is one of those things that for our industry is just overwhelming, right? It's the number one thing. If you're working too many hours, if you have nights, weekends, holidays, and you're putting all of, you're all into this, it's very difficult to say, you can't keep that pace. And so a lot of that is, yes, here's the magic that happens, but this is the consequence of it, right? So in most form of RFP teams that I have seen, we're really good at tracking things, right? You have to. There's so many components. There's so many different things. And it's a lot easier to track this kind of stuff in the moment. It might seem like, oh, I don't really have that amount of time to put into this, or, oh, do I have to go fill this out? It's a lot easier to do that than to go back for over a year at budget time and go, oh, I have to figure out how to find this information. Oh, how many did we win? How many did we lose? How much did my team do? It is really looking at what are those things that are going to be able to be important to leadership, to be able to show what it is that we need, what it is that we are bringing to the table, and most importantly, what happens if we aren't there. This is what happens, right? You are, again, probably under-resourced, undervalued, all of that, and we want to make sure that you are able to show all of that. And again, don't assume that they know. I'm pretty I can guarantee you that most don't. So we looked at really, again, the number of questions in each RFP, the time spent working in each RFP, or by task or by team member. One of the things that we even looked at was, how long it takes to print, because people assume, and they assume incorrectly, that there is not, it's, oh, let me just change this, executive summary here. That's, not a summary, it's 12 pages, and then you have to print it out 20 times. They don't know how long it takes to print a single page on your printer. They might not know that, 12 times 20 equals, it's too early for math for me. I'm on the West Coast. But how much time it actually takes to then print that out. It is important to be able to show all of that, and to do that in a time while you're doing RFPs, I know is difficult, but at that, when you're looking at it, it's sometimes if you take a sample as well, right? If you have someone maybe on your team that is pretty good about, kind of remembering to do that. I'm always terrible. I start 8 a.m. This is what I started on, and that's the last thing I kind of track. There are also kind of various software that's out there. I think one of them is called like Toggle and things like that, about how to do that, to track some of that. And it's not necessarily about showing, no, it's definitely not about showing what you're doing, right? It's not about the micromanagement side or anything like that, but it's about showing exactly how long these things take. And it's harder to do that when you say, oh, I'm working on this RFP and it took us this many days, because the fact is that you're rarely working on one RFP at a time. And so you have to be able to kind of figure out, what's going back and forth, working on this report, answering these emails, talking to this sales rep, going to this meeting with SMEs. Understanding kind of all of those components that are in there. And then you can also use that for your own team to say, where are we spending a lot of our time, and is that working for us? So there are various things that you can do with this data. So again, looking at RFP software, what we looked at was wanting to make sure that there was a lot of reporting that we could get from it. And so with RFP software, we actually used RFPIO, but we're able to see how many hours were actually being spent in the system. And that was across all SMEs. So then it just became not only my team and how much time we were spending on RFPs, but how much time the company in total was spending on the, and this is just within the software. So that didn't account for meetings. It didn't account for other various things that you're doing outside of the system. But it was really interesting to be able to see, and looking at there an SME that was spending a ton of time in the system, and then we could reach out to them and say, okay, what's going on? How can we help you and your department be more efficient? How can we work on this to get you to be able to spend less time working on that if it's possible? We also looked at even just how many hours, again, we were working. We ended up doing, I had my team just track their actual hours, and that included weekends, that included holidays, and we were able to show that the amount of hours that we were working, we should have had 2.5 more people essentially on our team, and to be able to show that we were working 33 weekends days a year. We were working X many holidays. That starts to put it into terms for people of saying, oh, I didn't know that you were working that many weekends, or oh, I didn't know that you were working that many hours a week. And it was just really helpful to be able to, again, put it into context. And so if you're doing that, plus showing how to help the process and to make sure that the process was most efficient, at some point you do have to go back and say, okay, we're doing as much as we can. We need to have more resources. And for us, it was very easy to be able to prove, like, we cannot keep operating at that level, right? Again, burnout, fastest thing, it's the highest risk, it's the biggest red flag for any RFP team, because you are always working. That's what it feels like, right? How many vacations have you taken where there's an RFP that is coming, or that will be there when you get back? All of that kind of stuff. You need to be able to have that work-life balance, or else there are things that end up being at risk. And honestly, the proposals are one of those. There's every RFP coordinator has time, especially in the day or at night when it's gotten too late, and you go, I'm reading that sentence multiple times in a row, I need to stop, right? Or like, oh, I keep misspelling words, I need to stop. So it helps you be able to show that you need to have more resources. So within this as well is, even if you don't have the RFP software, you can look at how to just the various things that you need to do. Like I said, there's toggle, there's things that you can look at to try to task and track with those to be able to show how much time it takes. And again, it doesn't have to be the whole time. It can be a sample. Hey, this is a standard RFP that we receive. We know that it's the basic type of proposal and proposal process that we're going to do. Let's do this, and let's track how long these things actually take. With our team, it was great to be able to say, hey, here's an average of how long this is really taking us to do. Oh, this one's an outlier. It was much more complex. Oh, this one didn't have a questionnaire, or all of that kind of thing. You can compile all of those numbers, and it helps you make your case to show, like, no, this is how long it takes. Even if we're doing this one report and it seems fairly simple, maybe the software isn't up to speed, and we need to make sure, and this is how long it still takes. And guess what? You can't do anything else on your computer when that report is running. That was a big thing for our team, to show, when you're asking for these reports and you don't really need them, you're taking up this time. And not only are you taking up this time, but you're taking us away from doing something else that we could be doing. So all of this is really important to be able to just have that true data at hand, and to, again, not assume that everyone understands all of this. And this is, if you continually show all of this information, you know, you have to, it's the best way to be able to show that you need to have more resources, that you need to make things more efficient. And it also helps to understand why certain things shouldn't happen during the RFP process itself, right? There are a lot of things that you want to know about a group, maybe, or a client, customer. And you know, if it's not there in the CRM, and you have to go ask a sales rep, that takes time. You don't want to learn about anything during the RFP, the actual response management process. Anything that you can learn about them and learn about the opportunity and the value and what you should be looking at is really what you want to be able to understand prior to the RFP. It's much easier to look and to analyze and to pivot than it is to take it all in at the same time while you're trying to get the RFP kind of chopped up into their pieces, and, assignments sent out to SMEs and meetings scheduled and things like that. To do that all on top of learning about everything that your sales rep has been doing for the past 8 months with this client, it's too much. And there are things that, I always say there's, I think it's in about 3 million years, time is expanding, so we'll eventually have a 25-hour day. And until then, we still have 24. So there's only so much time that you can spend doing all of that. And as an RFP person, your ultimate responsibility is to make sure that your RFP is, your proposal is done, it's complete, it's accurate, and it's turned in on time. So looking at the right sales stack, right? So how can you also use this RFP automation or other types of tracking and data in order to take advantage of that to help be more efficient and to help kind of drive that transparency of the actual process? So taking advantage of the software that you currently have, looking at how to use that to your advantage. Rarely doesn't a proposal team ever have an influence on the actual software that's being used by a company. When my previous company moved to Teams, no one came to us and said, "Is that all right if we get rid of Skype and we move to Teams instead?" That doesn't happen. So we have to find a way to make that work, and how to get to the most amount of people, and to make sure that it's consistent. It's great when you have RFP software to be able to find ways to integrate that. There's, for RFPIO, for example, integrates with a lot of different CRMs. We at Cambia used Salesforce, and to be able to take advantage of the information and the data that's put into Salesforce, and to not have that repeated in the system when it comes to us. It's to take advantage of exactly what sales is doing. And it also, other types of things like RFP software can really look at how to make your process more efficient where it needs to be, because it's not necessarily about taking over the process, right? RFP software will not be, self-serve, essentially, for the purpose of response management and that response process. But it can help make things more efficient where you are currently doing things manually. And then going back to looking at the data, and understanding where you're spending your time in the process, it helps you understand what your needs are for RFP automation software. And it helps build that case of like, hey, we are spending so much time looking, in our database, or if we don't have a database, going back and looking through, previous RFPs to pre-populate this before we send it out. If that takes too long, if that's taking up a good portion of your intake process, and before you can take, taking a couple of days before you can get things out to subject matter experts, that's an important thing to look at. Is there something that can help you with that? And with all of that, obviously, is anything that kind of consolidates all of that into one single system. So if the response management process is in there alongside of your content database, alongside an assembly proposal builder type of process, if that's all in there together, that's going to help really bring together all of that for you. So that concludes all of what I was talking about today. I wanted to see if there were any questions, and I believe there might be, but I'm trying to figure out GoToWebinar.
Certainly. No, thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much for all of that. That was very helpful and insightful. And I know this is a struggle that many of our members have. So again, I want to remind our attendees, please go to the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. If you had any specific questions about some of the points that Kelly made, or there could be something that you think of that maybe wasn't addressed that you're curious about, which you're curious, you can feel free to type that in here as well. I was wondering, Kelly, when you're talking about leveraging your various software platforms and having them talk, so say if someone says, okay, we use this software A, we use software B, we use software C. I wonder if they can talk. What's the next step? Like where can you turn to find out whether or not all your various software can talk?
I think that it's important to understand and talk with the product managers of in your own internal IT teams, but to also really have that frank discussion with kind of if you're looking at other software. So for example, when we looked at various software for RFP response management, when we were looking at all of the various software out there, that was an important piece. And to say, hey, and do you actually integrate with this? And it's important to actually understand, when you say integrate, what does that mean? Is there different directions of the information that comes back and forth? Is it bi-directional, where you can actually push other information out so it's not just kept in there? But it's to understand where the bulk of your information is kind of stored internally. What's the main thing? So for us, looking at my previous employer, it was looking at Salesforce. That was the intended source of truth. And then saying, okay, that's the main thing that we need to have and make sure that we're talking with it. And how does that look? And to really ask those pointed questions with different with the RFP software or internally, to say, hey, what are our limitations with this? Because there could be internally. So it's just really kind of doing your own research and digging into it. But again, making sure you go at it with the main your main pieces, right? Everything can't necessarily talk with everything. It would be great if it did. But what's the most important to you at your company, and what's being used the most?
Certainly, that makes a lot of sense. And I'll offer for our attendees, having gone through that ourselves, even here at APMP, looking at software, I think it's also important that when dealing with the software representatives, they might say, oh yeah, we integrate with that. I would suggest do not leave it at that. I would suggest, when you want to know about software integration and a company says, sure, we integrate with that, the next response should be, show me, and have them show you and walk you through how the software integrates. It's worth that. It seems like a lot of extra time, but that is time very well spent. You will learn a lot about how people have very different interpretations of integration and whether it's valuable or not. Mark, our attendees are starting to bring in questions now, which we appreciate. Mark is asking, when going through this process of streamlining the software or getting the software to communicate with each other, et cetera, where do you find that clients, in what areas do your clients find the biggest time savings do you find?
Um, I think that, for us, and what I've seen is that it's the ability to make things consistent, and the time saver is the consistency is helps over time with sales reps, with subject matter experts. um, it's about making sure that you don't get into the game of RFP telephone. So if a sales rep is saying company ABC, and then you say, oh, okay, ABC, and then it gets to SMEs, and it's there's that ability to have a bit of miscommunication, and so to be able to have everything continue to connect and talk to each other. It takes down on because there's a lot of information that RFP teams need to have from sales in order to understand and to start the process, right? If there are producers or brokers that are involved, you need to make sure that those are which ones and who they are. Maybe you need to have all of the basic information about the client, address, things like that, for things like cover letters, and you want to be able to not have to have everyone continually repeat things, right? That a long time ago, that was part of our process, and here's our form that we needed to have. And they're like, oh, I just put all this stuff into Salesforce. Can't you just look in Salesforce? And we're like, okay, like we get it, right? When you start to have to fill in things over and over again, it's too much. But again, for everyone during that process, it's about the consistency. So it's less, hey, RFP coordinator, where do I find this? Oh, where was the kickoff presentation stored at? When you start to have the same consistent process each time and the same places where things are stored or connected, and you say, hey, I'm putting all of this into a group Teams chat, and here's the files, and we put all of that in there, you get added immediately as soon as we start this, and this is where we communicate with things. The more that they start to see that, it's less coming to you and saying, hey, can you send me that thing again? It's just all stored there. That I think is a pretty high efficiency part of the process that we've seen.
Certainly, that makes a lot of sense. Graham is asking, so when you're a small team and you have hundreds of sales reps around the globe, how do you recommend focusing your team to provide initial support? I think it seems daunting to position yourselves to to hundreds and hundreds of sales reps around the globe. How do you recommend focusing the team to provide initial support?
That I understand. So for my previous employer at Cambia, we worked with 4 different markets, and so I had a team of 4 RFP coordinators at the time, and it didn't make sense for us in the workflow from each of the markets to have one coordinator per market. That just didn't make sense. And there were certain things that we were looking at to say, okay, what is our scope, right? Because it was essentially the 5 of us, and eventually became the 7 of us. But it was us against 200, sales reps, and those were large groups and things like that, and so it didn't include some more of the mid-market or smaller market sales reps. But kind of understanding the full scope of what is happening, and understanding, like, for us, there was a lot that we necessarily couldn't take on because we didn't understand what that volume was. And so for us, it was, saying we had to put some kind of, partition up to say, nope, that's at this point, that can't be us, because we don't know what that volume looks like. And until you can show us that, there's no way that we can just say, yes, we'll take on everything. When we started changing the language of saying, from RFPs, which we had a stronghold of like, yep, RFPs, people heard that RFP, RFI, and they went, oh, that's Kelly's team. To say winning and retaining accounts, then it became like, oh, there's a ton, and they started coming, from all different angles, and even with my team going, what really is our scope then? It's again really about understanding the entirety of what that looks like, what is the sales team doing, and then what you can support at that time. And it is difficult, especially if you are not necessarily aligned with the sales organization, if you are not necessarily a part of their department. But that's where I think the partnership with them becomes even more important, because you do want to be able to be a partner. You want to, be not only that coordinator, but true consultant to them. You have to be able to have that communication with them.
Certainly. And it sounds like what I heard you talking about might be related to another question that we have here. And again, I want to encourage our attendees, if you have any questions for Kelly, please feel free to use the questions pane here in the GoToWebinar control panel. But another question was about pushback. So say we start to set up the technology the way we want it with all these benefits. Change management is hard. And right, we as human beings, we're kind of wired to resist change. And so what about, so we set all this up, but then sales leaders, are saying, oh, I have my systems and I like things the way they were. We're getting pushback. What are the good, strong, arguments, value propositions, even to convince the others involved now that they need to adopt, these new workflows and whatnot?
It is hard. I always joke that I'm not a dictator, but I am a humble tyrant. I do like to, but no, it is hard, and any kind of change is hard. And I think that is important when you're looking at software in general, as well as or any type of change to your process, your current process, is the feasibility of it. Right. There are a lot of things that I wish that even that I can have all kind of, pulled together so I can have my kingdom. But it doesn't quite happen like that. And so it, again, really is about making sure that everyone is on the same page. It is very difficult when you're trying to change something that you think is a problem and they don't think it's a problem. And I think that, it is hard to change that mentality, right? And I think that there are a lot of times where even I've heard, previously from sales of, oh, like, why do we need to do this? And it's hard to be able to say, no, the question is, why are we not doing this, right? So it's about really being able to come to the table with your business case and making sure that you have that strength of this is the importance of this, right? Making sure that people understand. And again, it's a lot about that assumption, right? Again, it's my previous boss saying, I don't think they do. I don't think they do understand. I don't think they do know. You guys are just good at what you do, but there's not a lot of transparency into that process. And so they just, poof, here's your proposal. And they don't quite understand that. And I think opening that up and looking at that and having a real, stark understanding and, view into exactly what is happening. I, guarantee that, almost all of you here on this today feel under-resourced, and you want to be able to have something make a change, in order, because everyone wants to have that proposal that is fantastic and you want to do that good job. You don't want to just get it done. You want to be able to have be a real partner and with sales and to win and to show and demonstrate that amazing value of that proposal becomes a no-brainer. but you have to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And if they aren't, you can do what you can, but the change management side of it is difficult. For us, when we were looking at this, to be able to open up that process and use something like RFPIO where everyone can see exactly what's happening, that was a big change. Working on RFPs can be very isolating. I know at times, it's, 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday, and I'm going, why am I the only one, working on this? How come I care more about this? With RFPIO, it was nice because then you could see exactly when people were working on this and people were in the system and they were doing this, and it just made that view a lot easier. And with that, it made the ability to get people on board with the change a lot faster. Plus the fact that it's just really easy to use. It's very user friendly. I've never, for us, just as talking, not as an RFPIO employee, but as a former customer, it made a difference of not have, it was the fastest adoption that I had seen. And we were actually pretty surprised at that because we really looked at like, okay, trying to take baby steps with the changes to not do it all at once. But demonstrating this is why we're also making that change. This is the value to you, not to us as a team. This would make things a lot easier for us. Oh, hey, do you not want to, do you have questions? Do you want to talk with other SMEs? Do you want not as many emails in your inbox, or to get that, on these chains going back and forth about what you should be saying and how you should be saying it? Just have this all in here. You have to be able to look at what the value is for them. For sales, I had immediately sales leadership. Oh, this is where you can go to look for content. You don't have to ask me. You don't have to, go over to product. You don't have to go to the RFP team. Go here. This is where it's stored. You can easily go look at it. There are a lot of different things, but again, it depends on showing the value to those specific people and not just the value you see in it. That was a long answer, sorry.
No, that's great. That's a lot of great advice in there just about change management in general, I find. Excellent. We've got a number of questions as well, and some of these questions are covering a wide variety of topics in addition to the topic here. And I want to, so I just, this is not just a shameless plug. I encourage, with many of these questions that are being asked, I encourage people to go to apmp.org and find our webinar library. There are a couple different ways you can find that. You can use our search to find the webinar library. And for some of these questions, there are entire webinars dedicated to some of these topics. And so I encourage you to go there. Also, APMP's content website, winningthebusiness.com. If you haven't discovered winningthebusiness.com yet, again, a lot of these topics are addressed in thorough detail here. So I encourage you to check that out. Another question, let me see, again, specific to this topic. Well, we've got, someone's asking about RFP team structures. Maybe as we're structuring our software and some of the connections that might have to the team structures. So you've got proposal managers, content managers, et cetera. How do you, Kelly, like to see, like what kind of structures do you see are effective, or what are the themes when you find a team that's structured pretty well and the software is structured pretty well? What's kind of a general example of in general you like to see a structure look like this?
I think, it depends on, again, kind of the company and the industry and things like that. What I have really seen and what I personally like to see that works is, RFP people, I always joke, are a jack of all trades, masters of all, right? And at that point, that is not feasible. we do everything, and from what I have seen and the people that I know, everyone does everything very well, but it's not something that you can continue. And so for us, it's not necessarily about just adding more RFP coordinators, because I think that there are everyone has a pretty good handle on how to multitask and how to work on multiple RFPs at the same time. But really looking at, again, what is some of the bulk of what it is that you're doing that you don't have time to do, or what is it that you want to be able to do that you can't at this point. So for us, when I was looking at, how to add more headcount to our team, it was, I don't need just more RFP coordinators, while it would be fantastic. What is it that we really needed to have? And how do we break up that RFP process to have more time for RFP coordinators to actually coordinate the RFP? And so we looked at, adding, for me, it was looking at actually having more specific roles of writers, of a data analyst, so it really, like I said, it depends, but I think that, I think there are a lot of teams that are very small that have, just a handful of RP coordinators. But I think that a database manager, content manager, I think is probably one of the most, one of the least filled positions, but probably the most needed, because the content database is usually one of those things that ends up kind of a side of the desk thing, because people are always working on RFPs. You need to be able to have someone at least starting out in the team that is not doing RFPs, that is not actually doing the coordination, that's not kind of doing all of these various pieces, in order to actually focus on things, to be able to understand what is needed, and have that time to be able to do it. Everyone can't do everything at the same time. If you're always changing the tire on the moving vehicle, if you're changing multiple tires, that becomes a problem, right? That becomes a big old crash. So I think it really looks at, again, my recommendation is to look at what are those various things that your team is doing or not doing that you want to do outside of actually doing an RFP, actually coordinating that RFP. And that's where I think you can start. But it's important to have those people. If you just have a team of 10 RFP coordinators, it's great for RFPs, but not necessarily all of the other tasks that you as a team are doing.
Right. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Kelly, how can people contact you? If people want to reach out to you directly and just say, hey, Kelly, I had another question, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, if you haven't realized, I love talking about proposals and best practices. So everyone can reach out to me, and feel free at kelly@rfpio.com, or on LinkedIn. I'm also there as well.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Excellent. Listen, we want to thank Kelly for the presentation today. Thank you very much. We also want to thank RFPIO, a longtime sponsor of APMP and supporter of APMP, and we appreciate that very much. For our attendees, please do respond to that very quick survey. It's only a few questions about this webinar. You can just check boxes and hit submit, and it's very quick and easy. So please do that, because we do read it every time and with every webinar, and we do send that to our presenters to help them as well. And remember, you will get a link to the recording as well as the survey in just an hour here or two. So thank you all for joining us, and please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks.